Life is for the strong. It is earned, not given. Welcome to this week's bonus episode of Warfare, Advancement, and Revisionism. My name is Preston Floyd, and as always, I am your host. Now, I know I typically don't do a quote for these bonus episodes, but this movie has a couple of really good one-liners, all delivered by that character. Tao is the name of the character, and that's one of some really good ones that he puts out into the world in this. But first, I'd like to thank everyone who has been listening so diligently and has been enjoying. It really means a lot that I've kind of gotten the feedback and response that I have for what is a very personal passion project. Now, for those of you who are regular listeners, you know that this episode has been long promised, but I keep having to put it off due to various reasons. This was supposed to be out on Memorial Day, essentially, but just due to travel issues and then real-life work issues at my day job, as it were, I just haven't had the time to sit down and actually record this. So, but that being said, I am finally have a nice lazy Sunday to do this, and then of course I'll be recording our next regular episode shortly after this one. So since I've got a long day of recording ahead of me, let's go ahead and get on into the meat of this episode, and that is a review / critique of 2018's Alpha. So essentially what this is, it follows a prehistoric journey of a young boy / man who befriends a wolf, and essentially this is the story of how man first tamed wolves and led to the domestication of them and turning them into dogs. So right off the bat, kind of a very interesting production cycle that this movie underwent. It was actually filmed, I think, all in, I want to say it was 2016. It was either 2016 or 2017. And they actually released the trailer in June of 2017, but it did not actually release until a whole year after that. And I'm not sure exactly why. This is, of course, pre-pandemic, so that's not a reason. I don't know if it was an issue with the marketing, or if it was just due to other issues with the studio. It's hard to say. That said, this movie actually made money, which is a little surprising, considering I don't think a lot of people remember this movie, or even I don't know anyone that personally saw it in theaters. But I had a budget of, I believe, $50 million, and it almost doubled that. It got up to $99 million worldwide, I believe. So, very good doubling of the money. And it is something that's very nice. It's a it's a one-off. It's not part of a franchise, and it is an original piece of material. It's not based on anything, which is I love a good Marvel movie, and sci-fi genre, Star Trek, at least the old ones, and Star Wars, also the old ones for the most part. But it's nice to see that there's still original content that can make money and can be done well. Now, this movie, also another odd part about this, I mentioned that trailer. This movie was marketed extremely weirdly, at least initially. It almost came off like it was like a 1990 Disney movie. Almost it's like, boy meets dog, and they have a fun little family adventure. That's kind of how it was marketed, at least initially. It's not that. It is not that at all. It is a very gritty story. It's not, it's not R-rated. You could let a decently sensitized teenager watch this with no problems, or like even a preteen. I don't think this would cause any major traumas or anything like that. But it was, again, marketing for this was all over the place. I think if they had had a little bit more consistency, it it would have done even better than it did. So now this is starring, I believe, the young man that played the young hunter is Cody Smith McPhee. As far as I know, this was his first real like breakout star role, and then his the next biggest star, or at least in the movie, the next biggest star was Johannes Hakur Johannesson, and he's a very well known actor. He's Icelandic. He's been in he was in Game of Thrones for a few episodes. He was in Atomic Blonde, which is a Charlize Theron spy movie. Pretty good. He played Yuri in that. He was also in The Innocents, which is a very kind of trippy sci-fi or supernatural television series. It's on Netflix, I believe. He's in that. But so even if you don't know his name, you know the actor. You'd recognize him. But he was Lim in Game of Thrones, one of the earlier seasons. That's one of the Brotherhood Without Banners characters. He was also Sverri in The Last Kingdom, which is another very good historical kind of drama series that will be covered in future episodes as a bonus material. And then there are other actors in this, and I'll go over them kind of, as we get to them in the story. But these are the two main human actors, and they both do a very good job. Tao is the name of Johannes' character, and he is the chief of this tribe, and Cody is the son of the chief, and his character's name is Keta, and he is this is his first hunt. The other big star of this, which I'm going to go ahead and introduce at the outset, is the dog, and it is a very interesting kind of how they did this. So all the animals, or all the dogs in this, or all the wolves in this, are based on actual wolf dogs. I think they're Czechoslovakian wolf dogs is the thing, and they've kind of been touched up with CGI to make them even more wolf in appearance, and make them larger, as the case may be. So, go ahead and kind of start the synopsis. Movie begins with a group of young men all sitting around a fire, and they are kind of chiseling out and, well, not chiseling, but shaping and sharpening stones for spear tips. And they are moving very quickly, all trying to get their work done, and eventually they are stopped by the chief of the tribe, Tao, and he kind of goes around in a circle, kind of examines their work, runs his finger along the edges, and he'll either say pass or fail. And if you pass, the young men that pass kind of stand off to the side with the hunters, and those that fail go back to stand with the children and the women. Now his son Keta, played by Cody Smith McPhee, he passes and passes quite well, and you can really tell that the actor playing Tao, he does a great job in this. He's extremely pleased with his son's work. He runs his finger just barely across the blade, and it causes an immediate, small cut. And he's very pleased, and he kind of shows it to his number two in the group, who acknowledges it very clearly that this was a very good job. And then, odd thing, so you pass, you're set aside with the other hunters, and then they are immediately kind of jumped in, for lack of a better term. The hunters that are going on the hunt begin to beat the two boys that passed. And once they've been roughed up a little, not too badly, but they've got a couple of cuts and bruises. They are told to stop, and you can kind of see Ketta's mother, Tao's wife. She's kind of not happy about this. I guess she felt that it went on a little too long, but Ketta kind of, or Tao, excuse me. Eventually, he orders it to stop. And he delivers another one of his great one-liners from this movie. He says that pain will journey with us. Tao's got a lot of like little short maxims for his people. But once they're done beating, they are kind of hugged and welcomed by the other hunters. Being accepted. And Tao makes very clear that this is an important part of their lives. They have to do this, and that basically get ready for a very long and tough journey. During the evening, of course, Ketta still lives in his parents' hut, and he kind of overhears his mother just talking and just saying that she doesn't think he's ready. Because he doesn't kind of lead the same way Tao does, but Tao is like, look, he's got to do it, and he's a tough kid, and he'll come through. But you can kind of get the feeling that this kind of like put something on Ketta through most of this part of the hunt, and he definitely feels like he has stuff to prove, and that's going to kind of compound as other events happen on their journey. But before we kind of continue with that, I do want to talk about some of the or the language that they use for this. Now, they are not speaking a specific language that actually exists or existed. What they're using is known as a constructed language or a conlang. It is, in this movie, it was done up by a professor from a university in Canada, UBC Okanagan. It was just derived by Christine Schreier, and she uses a couple of different, proto-languages that she drew from to kind of construct this. Proto-Nostratic, Proto-Eurasiatic, and Proto-Dene-Caucasian. She also did like some Neanderthal language, like what she considered a Neanderthal language for one scene. I don't know if that scene ended up getting in the movie because I don't remember Neanderthals specifically in this, but those languages, Proto-Nostratic, just for curiosity's sake, it is kind of a it's a hypothetical like macro family, which would include the indigenous languages of Eurasia, which would be Kartvelian, Indo-European, Uralic, and then some other supposed language families, which some have fallen out of being considered part of a specific family, or they've been moved around stuff. But this is a hypothetical language. It was kind of come up with in the early 20th century. I think it's become much more controversial as time has gone by because there's not as clear of a connection between some of these languages, and due to time, for how long people have been living in certain places, certain languages could not have been a part of it, or if they were, it was like a cousin to what actually came into being. It's all theoretical. It's very esoteric, and I'm not well versed enough in linguistics to kind of give a full breakdown. But Nostratic is basically like the mother tongue, like the first language, or at least the survivor. It's the ancestor of all surviving languages, essentially. Um, which, of course, again, very controversial, especially these days. Now, Proto-Eurasiatic is a little bit more founded, a little bit more. It's still also a kind of a controversy in certain circles. And it doesn't necessarily have to be part of or a descendant of Nostratic to have existed. And then you have the Proto-Dene Caucasian, which is kind of like the language family that would be involved. Basque, North Caucasian, Tibetan, those kind of languages. Basically, like the steppe language before Proto-Indo-European. Which that's something we might get into in a future episode in actual real life. But essentially, she kind of combined the theoretical concepts for all these languages and kind of came up with them. And I think actually one of the terms, father, which is Ada, they actually use... That's actually a real word. That ended up being in a few languages, I think in Southeast Asia. I think Malaysian is what I read for it. But that's still kind of the term that's used for father in those areas. So, very well researched, and I do like that. Even if you can't really say for sure, it definitely gives a certain realistic feel to the world and to the characters. And it makes you definitely think that this is a different time. In addition to that, this takes place at 20,000 years ago in Europe, and these are this is kind of shown by, you can still see a lot of glacier and severe winter weather from the last ice age still kind of hanging around. You see woolly rhinoceroses, which are great. I also think that contributes to the kind of the otherworldly feel to this. And it's all very well done. And woolly rhinoceroses would very much be dying out at this point. They're getting ready to hit that mass extinction event that happens. But they're still there, and they're still being followed. And of course, you have wolves, steppe bison, which is the key for this hunt. This is what these people are going after. You also run into cave lions. These are very fatal, and that kind of leads us back into, I guess, the next part of our synopsis. As Keda's tribe travels to hunt, or at least the hunters of his tribe travel to hunt, they follow several megalithic stone structures, and they are, as they're being led by his father, he's kind of teaching him what he needs to know to lead in the future, kind of planning for his son to succeed him in someday. And he's just, trying to teach him stuff that he hasn't already learned in the village from the women and the other children he learns with. On their first night out in the kind of the plains, they run across a wild boar that they kind of catch to get to eat, and Tao tries to get Keda to kill the boar, but he can't do it. He can't bring himself to kill the boar for whatever reason, and eventually his father just completes the job. And then while they're around the fire cooking and eating, they are trapped, and Keda's friend, I guess his partner that he came into the hunt with, the other young man that passed the sharpening tests, he is attacked by a cave lion, and it's just like instantaneously killed. The lion just kind of cuts through their circle around the fire with just no one being able to do anything. And it definitely creates an atmosphere of danger and just fear that you'd have to live with out on the plains at this time. And it doesn't last long. You can hear the the other young man, I believe his name is Kappa, die like almost immediately. In the morning, they kind of give him a memorial service. They kind of place a little group of stones, all kind of decorated, and kind of like a rough cairn to symbolize that that's where someone passed. Along the way, they also meet another tribe of hunters. They speak a very similar dialect, but it's not the exact same. But they understand each other just fine, and you can tell that they've kind of hunted together in the past. The leader of that group and Tao are good. They kind of got a very nice working relationship, and they respect each other. You can tell. And this opposite leader, he kind of, he seems a little wary of Keta, not because he doesn't necessarily like him, but he is, as you eventually find out, he's lost his own son during the hunt, and you can kind of tell that he can probably see a lot of Keta in him. Eventually, they get to the location of the steppe bison that they've been hunting. They're on the edge of a cliff, and they're able to kind of drive them, but one of the animals, a bull of the herd, kind of charges at Keta while he's kind of separated from the group, or after the group kind of breaks ranks to kind of charge the bison herd off the cliff. Keta kind of loses his courage a little, and he tries to run, and this is a bad idea as the bison kind of like catches his clothing in his horn, and he starts to drag Keta towards the cliff, and Tao is able to hit the bison with the spear to kill it, but unfortunately it kind of throws him down the cliff as it's falling itself. And Keta is he's able to catch himself on the side of the cliff, and the tribe tries to help him, but the cliff is so steep. I mean, you say sheer, just a flat rock surface. There's just a little bit of stuff to grab on, and what he's holding on to breaks, and kind of falls and gets hit several times on the way down. And he kind of like hits on like a little ledge, and he's stuck there, and he's unconscious. And Tao, his father, of course, is screaming, and he's trying to like climb down to get him, but his tribe stops, and they're like, "No, you can't do this." And essentially, basically, while the tribe is slaughtering these bison for meat and other byproducts, basically Tao spends the whole time just yelling at Keta to wake up, and he doesn't. And eventually, they have to kind of leave him there. And they perform another kind of burial ceremony right on the edge of the cliff when they leave their cairn. And they do something a little interesting here, and I'm glad they didn't follow through with it. But during the travels, they run across, they're in a cave one night, and they hear wolves, and Tao kind of explains, that the wolves are led by an alpha, and that alpha needs to be strong and all this other stuff. Basically, he's trying to say you need to be like a wolf alpha, and someday otherwise someone's going to kind of like challenge you. And Tao has a very fierce looking second in command, and it's kind of hinted that he may that he might be that challenge for Tao, that he might try to use this to a serpent, but they never do that, and I'm glad they kind of, I think they might have like decided. And I don't know the script writing process. I don't know if it's been like worked around, but you could definitely tell that this guy is a very competent person. He's definitely the number 2 in the tribe, and he cares. Like, it's not just him, postulating. He's not like a hand wringing, mustache twirling like schemer in the background. Plotting to usurp leadership. I'm glad they didn't do that, because that's kind of cheesy and overdone, and it really doesn't fit with like the themes of the movie. But that said, and he very much, he's trying to get Tao, the leader, to just leave. He's like, look, I know you're upset. It sucks, but you're our leader. We need you to get us home. And eventually he gets through, and he's kind of the reason that they have this ceremony and they escape. Or not escape, but they return home without Keta in tow. Now, of course, that'd be a very bleak ending to a very short movie. But as you find out, Keta is not dead. He has merely been knocked unconscious, and he's probably got a broken rib. And he definitely has a broken leg. And he wakes up as a buzzard begins to peck at him. This wakes him up, and he kills the buzzard just on instinct. He grabs it by the neck and just slams it into the side of the cliff. And he's in a lot of pain, and he's trying to climb up, and he gets a decent way up before the rocks kind of crumble under his hand again, and then there's a rainstorm as this is going on, and he is eventually thrown into this river valley that was dry when the bison herd went in there, but because of the rains, it floods rapidly, and this saves his life. And eventually he's able to kind of swim enough to pull himself out, and he's able to set his leg in a very rudimentary fashion and begin the long task up to where his group was camped at this top of the mountain. He finds the cairn that they left for him, so he knows they assumed him for dead, and he begins to kind of follow back the way that they came. And of course, along the way, he does some very rudimentary survival skills. He has to keep resetting his leg several times. He has to eat worms that he finds in just drying pools. He eats bugs. Eventually, he finds some rocks that he can use to kind of make some rudimentary spears, and he tries to kill a rabbit, but during that process, he is attacked by a group of wolves. And during that attack, he is able to get up in a tree, but one wolf is able to kind of grab onto his leg as he's climbing, and he kind of reacts and slashes it with his spear tip, and it really hurts the wolf, and the wolf is kind of left there. Eventually, after a couple of days of being stuck in the tree, the wolves get bored and they leave him, but they also leave their injured companion. And once he gets down, he's about to kill the wolf he hurt, but for whatever reason, his soft heart, I guess, that prevented him from killing the trapped boar, he feels bad for the animal, so what he does is he kind of takes some string or leather strips that he has from his outfit. He ties the wolf's mouth shut, and he takes it with him. They get to a cave where he finds evidence of kind of an altar, essentially. There's a skull on a little stone stalagmite or stalactite, I forget which one. And it's got some mortar and pestle around, for kind of crushing things up. And he uses that to kind of make a medicine for himself, and he puts it on his injured foot to kind of fight infection. He does the same thing for the wolf. And the wolf wakes up during this, and he's, very, he says a wolf's way, so it's kind of angry at him. And eventually, he trusts the wolf enough, because the wolf is in bad enough shape, that he'll untie it. He gives him some water in the bowl that he used to mix up the medicine, and he catches a rabbit in a snare, and he starts cooking the rabbit. And the wolf is trying to get his food, but he punches it and just makes it back off, and basically establishes dominance over the wolf very quickly. Eventually, though, he gets well enough that he can travel. His foot is a lot better, and he begins to further trek back. Along the way, they go through other survival tests, just water, food, that kind of stuff. And they really show some good survival stuff in this. It's very Call of the Wild-esque, which is a great book if you've never read it. And I really love like the slow build of the relationship between the two. And Keta, he's not training this animal for any specific reason. He kind of felt bad, about hurting it because it was just trying to survive the same as him. And they, eventually they do come across a pack of wolves, a rather large one, but they do. I guess Alpha is a part of this pack, and they kind of Alpha kind of comes out and just kind of greets them, and they kind of leave Keta alone because I guess Alpha kind of speaks up for him, for lack of a better term, and eventually Alpha kind of leaves with the pack, and Keta kind of gives his blessing, and he kind of continues his journey alone. But it's taken him a while because of his wounds. The season has started to change into winter. He gets to a frozen lake, and where he runs back into this pack of wolves. And there's he runs into them on a frozen lake. They're eating a carcass. He runs to them, but the ice breaks, and he kind of falls through. And Alpha kind of is able to fish him out by grabbing onto his clothes. And Alpha continues to journey with him from that point on. They find a man who is frozen to death in his tent, and they get a bow and arrow from there. And then they kind of they are then attacked by some cave hyenas, and they run into a cave, oddly enough, to try to escape from them. However, once they are inside, they are attacked by a cave lion. Alpha attacks the animal to try to save, Keta, even though, of course, cave lions are massive, and wolves, while larger than dogs by a lot, is not able to stand up to it. Keta is able to use the bow to kill the lion with an arrow. Of course, Alpha is very badly wounded, and Keta is as well. They're both in bad shape, but Keta is able to carry the wolf. At least he's that well, and thankfully enough, they're close enough to the village that Keta is able to get them there in time. He passes out almost immediately into getting into his family's camp, and of course they're shocked to see him, and then they take the pair to the village healer, medicine woman, and she kind of tends to both their wounds, and then during that process, Alpha, the dog, gives birth to, the wolf gives birth to a litter of puppies. So Keta is very surprised that Alpha is actually a female, and then they're kind of welcomed into the group, and then you kind of see the final scene with Keta and Alpha together. They're kind of like just watching the sun kind of set, and then these very adorable looking puppies are kind of just like trying to get Keta's attention. And then it cuts forward to some time, and you see the tribe, each with their own animal, running with them. Very good movie. There are a little bit of like hokey, elements to it, but the levels that they have to go to through survival, the brutality in teaching, training, the stuff that they'd have to eat to survive while they are out in the wild. Very, very well done. So I think this is a very good movie, very underrated. I'd give it a solid B. It's not quite as good as Quest for Fire, in my opinion, but it's enjoyable. I definitely recommend it. It is free right now on Amazon Prime, but you do have to. It does have ads, unless you rent it or buy it, of course. In which case you don't have to worry about it. But it is free with ads. It's like the Freevee extension for Amazon Prime. Some of the stuff I didn't like in the movie, I felt like the CGI does not hold up that well for the animals, especially the wolves. Like, it's not a problem when they're running or they're in action, but like when you're just kind of looking at Alpha kind of in the cave, it does not look like a real animal, which is, obviously if it's CGI, you know that. But I found out after the fact that this dog is actually played by a Czechoslovakian wolfhound whose name's Chuck. They're not credited, by the way, but that's just what I found out reading about the movie. But I would not know that this was based on a real animal. Like, I thought it was just completely computer generated. At least when you're doing the close-ups in the cave and they're kind of just like kind of sitting together. So that doesn't hold up all that well. I thought they were gonna do, like, again, there were a couple times where you thought they might have like kind of a internal power struggle thing between Tao and his number 2, or Keta and Tao's number 2. Thankfully, they don't go through with that. It's just, it becomes very much a survival story, which I think, again, plays very much into the strengths of the movie. There are some very nice small details, of course, when they're kind of like crawling along at the hunting scene about to launch their attack. And ants are crawling across one guy's hand, and he eats them just to get, I guess, a little bit of protein before the attack. It's just really small touches that make this movie great, or at least are the greater part of the movie. Again, B for me. So I do recommend it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I kind of wanted to go into on this. Yes, there was another problem I had with it. So the bow that they find, I don't know if that's accurate at this point. I do think bows and arrows are probably older than we believe, but what they would be are not what Keta finds. I think it's a little too large. If you look at people like, and again, I know that they're bound by the materials they have on hand, but if you look at like hunter-gatherers in Africa, their bows tend to be much smaller and more, as well as their arrows, and they tend not to have that kind of penetrating power. They're used mainly to hit smaller animals or to poison, to coat with poison and then kill them just with like a small cut. I know there is some debate, and we mentioned it in the episode when we were talking about microlith blades, whether they were used for arrows or for throwing spears or javelins. That is a bit of a debate. I don't know if they'd have bows and arrows at this point this far north. But, maybe that you could argue that this person's coming from the south, that they had the technology where they're coming from, and they just happened to stumble across it. Whatever the case, it's a small thing, and I obviously don't believe that this is the true first domestication of wolves. I don't think it would need any kind of dramatic fight for survival together to tame a wolf. Honestly, you could do it probably in a couple generations if they were just falling behind a group of humans or staying on the outskirts of a human camp. If they were just eating like whatever leftovers that the humans aren't getting, or aren't using, I think the wolves would rapidly become dependent on humans. They don't have to be hand-fed, that kind of stuff. It could very much be done on the outskirts and over not even that long of a time. Animals and plants can be bred very quickly. There's an example of a Russian geneticist. In recent years, he basically created a domesticated fox, essentially. And it took him, I think, around 20 years to do that. Now, obviously, this is a little bit different. You're working with probably a much larger population, and probably a much more dangerous population as well. Wolves are much more dangerous than foxes, of course. But, I think you could probably have gotten some domesticated wolves fairly quickly if you realize that they were becoming dependent on you, or if they weren't attacking you or vicious. You could probably get like a decently sized group within 100 or so years. So I don't think it was obviously this dramatic, and I don't even think you would need to be that caring for wolves, just due to the way wolves work. They're not that much different from dogs, at least in terms of behavior. Now, of course, they are very dangerous, and you should not try to tame an actual wolf, especially if they are starving and you were in the way of food. But again, I don't think the first steps of domestication were planned or that active. It was probably a very passive process, at least at the start for humans. Obviously, as we began to control them more and have more of them to control, that begins the more domesticated aspect of them, and then of course that leads them to becoming fully dogs at that point. But again, that's all theoretical. Don't really know for sure. That obviously is not as interesting of a movie. A group of people like selectively breeding animals for a couple of centuries. That's obviously not nearly as fun as this movie is. But yeah, if you enjoy a good survival movie, a nice pseudo-historical movie, I'd give this a recommend. Solid B, 7.5 out of 10. Watch it, enjoy. I think you'll like it. But so that's it for this bonus episode. I hope you've enjoyed. And wow, this is a long one. I talked almost 40 minutes about this. I need to actually make a real episode as long as this at some point, which I'll get to eventually. But thank you for listening to this bonus episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we will see you here for the main episode, and we'll go from there. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Goodbye. Have a good rest of your day.